יהיו לרצוני מרפי והגיון ליבי לפניך אדוני צורי וגואלי. Shalom Aleichem Beruchim Habayim. Welcome everybody to our ongoing series, if you will, in the mystical Talmud. We've entitled this series, How to Live a Godly Life. Because mysticism is never meant to be theoretical. It's meant to be transformational. And if it don't transform you, well, you're missing something, obviously. We are right now in the Messianic predictions section of the Talmud, in the tractate Sanhedrin, in its famous chapter called Perek Helek. I believe this is the 5th installment of this specific part, and well, at least we're going to do one more after this, and after that we will see. Of course, I am your host, Ariel Tzadok. You find me online at KosherTorah.com. For the record, it is the 20th of June, 2012. It is the summer solstice and the new moon of the month of Tammuz. According to Hebrew astrology, this begins the sign of Cancer. So, with no further ado, let's get busy. I feel like one of the announcers from those old 1950s programs, the cliffhangers. When we last left on our last episode, we were discussing, etc. So I really feel like I'm in that mindset here today, because when it comes to talking about the coming of Mashiach, this is something. Remember, we're working from a text now which is a documented 1,500 years old, and it is recording ideas and views which are hundreds of years older than that. So boy, oh boy, people have been talking about this stuff forever. It has led people to calculate dates and times with all kinds of funny predictions. And those who have embraced the Messianic concept, and I can only speak of the Jewish world and the Christian world, because those are the only ones I'm familiar with. I don't know how it is in the Muslim world. They also have their concept of a Messiah, but I don't know if they have the long slew of false predictions of his coming, as we find in Judaic sources and, in all due respect, Christian sources as well. So, even today, you go on many of these popular Messianic style websites, and when I checked even this morning, has all these predictions from this rabbi and that rabbi, that this year is significant, this time is significant, the next 90 days is significant, on and on. But they've been doing this literally for years, and it's finally dawned on them that they better put a disclaimer saying, just in case this stuff doesn't happen. Now, ultimately, the Mashiach has to come. What that means, that's another interesting discussion, which would take us outside of the context of the Talmud. It would take us back into Tanakh, it would take us into oral traditions, and needless to say, it's not our topic tonight. But what is the topic, and what's very important for us to realize, I'm going to give you a little insight here. Prior to coming into class tonight, I was watching one of my favorite television programs on the Science Channel called Through the Wormhole, which is a program about the most avant-garde scientific ideas and beliefs, hosted by Morgan Freeman. It is in its 3rd year. Boy, oh boy, I will tell you, you want to make an investment? Go buy the DVD series of this, because it is really profound stuff. The episode that was on that I was watching now was discussing biocentrism. Fancy word for saying, is it possible that the entire universe is alive? Just like our physical body is made up of a gazillion different parts, all acting together as one body, is the entire universe functionally one body with one consciousness? according to our Torah sources, we say absolutely yes, it is. And we refer to the body. We call it the Olam HaAsiyah. We say that God's presence imbues it. Science, you can call that information. We call it the indwelling presence or the Shekhinah. But bottom line is, we believe in biocentrism. And it's interesting that now science is postulating or possibly discovering that which sages have known and discussed for literally thousands of years. What does this have to do with the coming of Mashiach? Something absolutely important. Because when understanding the concept of the Messianic era, as it is described both biblically and Kabbalistically. By Kabbalistically, I am not just referring to later Kabbalistic traditions such as the Zohar. I'm going to go back into where the original concepts of the Messiah began and were embellished and expanded upon. What we today call pseudepigraphal literature. The original Hechalot schools. The literatures that you can find in the likes of Qumran, the Dead Sea Scrolls and the like. This was the foundations of what we today call the Torah mystical traditions. That I don't think anybody can deny. But there, they spoke of the coming of Mashiach as being some overwhelming, profoundly changing experience. I am sure we have all heard of the hype of this year 2012 and December 21st, the winter solstice. Here we are at the summer solstice. Well, when the next solstice comes around, all kinds of hype is expressed. What's going to happen? I've talked about this years ago. Frankly, I don't think anything's going to happen. Could be wrong. I think we're going to be in for a tumultuous summer, but not the end of the world as we know it, at least in my opinion. As I said, time will tell. But the hype of it is a big deal. Well, the coming of Mashiach and the transformations therein are a big deal. And the only thing I can compare it to is all the hype that people expect for 2012. If you look at all the theory and talk online, people are thinking that there's going to be a polar shift, that the tectonic plates are going to break up, and all heck is going to break loose, and all life on Earth is going to be radically, fundamentally changed. But I don't know if that's going to happen between now and the next 6 months. But it is predicted, spoken of to happen, with the coming of a Mashiach in multiple sources. So that's a big deal. But now I want to get back to this concept of biocentrism and why this is so. You see, from the original apocalyptic and later Kabbalistic points of view, true, the entire earth and the universe is alive. It is a holistic whole, a singular body of multiple parts, all sharing the hive mind of Hashem, of God. The body is now sick. Now, let me ask you, when our bodies get sick, what do we do? Do we pursue behaviors and activities which reinforce the illness to make us weaker and sicker? If that were to be the case, would we not then expect the death of the body? Or would we pursue a course of healing, wherein which the invading virus is destroyed by the antibodies and everything else that God has set up within our biology? If our earth is alive, and indeed Maimonides, in his Foundations of Torah, writes that the earth is alive, conscious, sentient, knows itself and knows God. as such, if it is ill, its body, like our bodies, will follow the course of an illness. And as our bodies naturally fight an illness to make our bodies well, so the body of the earth fights the illness infecting it, till ultimately it too will become well. Guess what is the illness that is making the earth sick? No, don't say it's mankind. But how about saying the wrong, unnatural, or evil behavior of mankind, of humanity? That makes the earth very sick. And therefore, it is only natural that the earth will heal itself, of course, by, we say, the hand of God, etc., and so on, but understand this within the context I presented to you here. Because as we were discussing in our last lesson, when Messiah will come, we concluded by saying that the Messiah will come when all of the people repent before God. And the question was asked, well, gee, what happens if they don't repent? The answer, if you remember, was given saying, well, then God's going to raise up a bad king who's going to kick their butts and make them repent. So, that bad king serves a good purpose. We spoke about that king being the Armelos, who the Christians call the Antichrist. And I digressed to discuss about politics and how whatever is going on in the world, we have to remember God is behind it. Now, along this line, let's delve into conspiracy theory. The world as we know it is ran by that dark and secret organization called by many names like the Bilderbergs, the Illuminati, and yada yada, on and on and on. And who do these groups report to? They report to the fallen angels. And who do the fallen angels report to? They report to the head, who is Samakel. He is the devil. Woo! So therefore, the New World Order is a demonic plot to surrender the world into the hands of Satan. We've heard that before. That's I hate to say it, a rather famous, maybe even popular conspiracy theory. But this fits into a Christian motif wherein which the universe is viewed in what historically was originally a Zoroastrian orientation of equal good and evil fighting it out. And indeed, in the Christian theology, that's pretty much how they view the world. And for those of us living here in Western civilization, we should all know this. Everything around us says there's God fighting the devil, and the devil's out to get your soul. And the devil is God's enemy, and God is going to take him and he's going to beat him up and throw him in the pit of fire, a la Book of Revelations, and God will win. But until then, the devil is doing his dirty. That is Christian theology. And I must emphasize, Jewish teachings are radically, emphasis, different. In other words, for us, Samakel is God's servant. Equal to Michael and Gabriel, he is. And he probably sits at the same table as them, if you will, and works with God. If you will remember from the book of Job, when it says the sons of God come together and along comes the Satan, he manages to walk in with them. And God talks to him. He doesn't say, what are you doing here? Get out. He says, no, hey man, where you been? What's going on? And he enters into discussion with them. And he bargains with them. And we all know the story of the book of Job. Nowhere is the Satan punished for bringing up Job, or punished for what he did to Job. Why? Because he's doing what God told him to do. Samakel, fallen angel as he is, he'll be punished if he violated the commandment of God. But if he is fulfilling the commandment of God, there ain't no punishment. So, little message there to all of our Illuminati, Bilderbergs, and all the rest of our conspiracy guys out there. The big bad guy who you're reporting to, right? The fallen angels are reporting to Samakel. Yeah, and you're worshipping Samakel. Let me tell you something about Samakel, a little secret about him. He worships the same God as do we. Samakel is, if you will, the dark hand of God. But he's still God's servant. And he gets God's job done. Period. So all these conspiracy guys will bow down to worship the devil, because we've taken the side of evil over God. They don't realize there is no such dichotomy. And their embrace of such a dichotomy is going to be their own judgment. And the one who is going to judge and accuse and prosecute all the Satan worshippers is going to be none other than Satan himself. Yep. That's what they get. Bunch of dummies. But life has to go on. History must proceed. The body must heal. And this is what I want to focus on with you. We are not meant to be looking towards any times. That's why all of these predictions and all these websites want to give you this numerological formula and this date and that date. First of all, anything based on a date is wrong, because we are not in the year 5,772 as many people consider. We are 165 years beyond that. And what that means, as we've discussed in previous classes, who knows? What our sages spoke of here, I think, is so important, because rather than give predictions of dates, they understood the nature of the illness in the body of humanity, the nature of the illness in the earth, in life. And they recognized what symptoms would be which indicate the healing process, which indicate when things are almost all better. And we refer to this as the time before the coming of Mashiach. And that is what these signs were all about. Now, we discussed many of these signs in a previous lesson, and we're going to discuss some others now. And we can look at them and we will draw some conclusions from it. But yet, what is the significance of those conclusions? I shrug my shoulders, because like you, like me, who knows? We are in the Finkel English version on page 664 under the topic, Portents of the Arrival of Mashiach. Rabbi Abba said, "There is no clearer sign of the arrival of Mashiach than this. As it says," and he's going to quote here Ezekiel 36:8, "O mountains of Israel, will give forth your branch and bear your fruit for my people Israel." Rashi's commentary says the clearest sign that the redemption is imminent is that the land of Israel will produce an abundance of fruit. Now wait a second. If this was said during the time of the Second Temple, people would go out into the field and said, well, is that like now? But this was spoken after the Roman invasion and conquest, in which, according to Roman policy, they left Israel as a scorched earth. There was nothing growing there. And indeed, until modern times, nothing did really grow there in great abundance. Now, it's interesting that with these end of days scenarios, we have a number of interesting things that actually fit together interestingly. Number one, with the close of World War II, many strange things began to happen. Number one, we discovered a weapon which has the ability to literally wipe out all life on Earth. And of course I speak of atomic weapons. Number two, something really weird started to happen after World War II that, even though it was present forever before this, it was only after World War II that it became such a vital interest. And I speak of UFOs, aliens. Are we in contact? Is there a connection? And I have written and lectured about this, that I find the conspiracy theories interesting. That the aliens supposedly come and are teaching humanity technology. And when we go back to our lessons in the book of Enoch, what did the fallen angels teach mankind other than what today we would call technology? That corruption forced God's hand to clean the house, wipe the slate clean, and restart by sending the flood, Noah and the like. And it is predicted that it's going to be like that again. But there's another interesting piece of this puzzle. Because as all of these UFOs and alien conspiracy stories started to fly around the world, something else happened. Radical, historical, and fundamentally different. Jewish people, righteous or not, socialist or not, irrelevant, reclaimed control over the Holy Land and established a Jewish state. And, quoting here from this of Ezekiel, the clearest sign of redemption is that the land of Israel will again be abundant in fruit. For those of you who do not know, what is Israel's original major export before it was technology and weapons? It was agriculture. How many of you have heard of the Jaffa orange? For the first time since Rabbi Abba spoke these words, and Ravina and Rav Ashi, who edited and codified this Talmud, wrote them down. Only in these last few years has this potential occurred. Does that mean that the state of Israel is a clear sign and portent of the coming of Mashiach? I think it is, personally. I could be wrong. Satmar Hasidim and then the Torah Karta certainly believe that's wrong. But I believe it's part of a greater scenario being guided by God. Does that mean that we should all move to the Holy Land and become citizens of the state of Israel? No. There's nowhere in prophecy that suggests that. It's not even here in the Talmud that it even suggests that. But we should look at the world body politic today and recognize that the existence of the state of Israel is, needless to say, playing a pivotal role in world history. Think about it. The geographical size of the state is minute. The number of people there is insignificant. And yet, its influence and power in the world body politic is profound. The problem between Jew and Arab is not only not going away, it's becoming a festering, cancerous sore, which is threatening to destroy the entire Middle East. And I tell you, the Middle East goes up in the world and in flames, the whole world is going to go. World War III. Guarantee you will not separate an Israeli, Iranian, Syrian war, full scale, not just tit for tat, You won't escape World War III. One happens, the other's going to happen. That's just politics. Now, what I'm getting at is that maybe this is all a part of a scenario, and maybe it's not. I know people in Israel today who are terrified that this summer of 2012 there's going to be a major war. Now, those of us who are going to listen to this recording a year from now, well, I guess we will know, because we've been in positions where we've been terrified about war before. Personally, I'm not so desirous for war. I would hope and pray that war doesn't have to come. But I also know that wars are a funny thing. And sometimes they're like a fever in the body which help cleanse it of an illness. Certainly World War II helped cleanse the body of the illness of Nazism. So, who knows what it means? Things for us to ponder and consider, and remember, there is no time frame here, but rather, like we've learned in our previous lessons, evolution and human consciousness. Now think about this for a quick moment. Why is there such animosity against Israel, supposed Zionism, and Jews in the world? Oh, it's because they're Palestinians. No, it's not. In all due respect, if there was goodwill on both sides, you could have peace by this time tomorrow. With goodwill on both sides, it's not really hard to do. All issues can be addressed when there is goodwill. Obviously, with the lack of goodwill, nothing gets done, hasn't been done, and won't get done. Somehow, somewhere, something, needless to say, is going on. So, here we go. Rabbi Eliezer says another clear sign of the imminent arrival of Mashiach. And he says here, quoting another verse from Zechariah 8:10. He says, before those days, people had no earning, nor were there earnings for animals, and those who traveled back and forth had no peace from the enemy. And he says that poverty, when worry and terror will be rampant. Gee, again that sounds like today. Psychologically symptomatic of the problem. Why is there this problem? Why this inability to accept Jews, Judaism, a state of Israel, a state of Jews? The rejection at such a fundamental emotional level is pathological. It is indicative of something deeply wrong. You can say, well, I don't like the way that certain people do things. Yeah, I agree. Neither do I. Change their behaviors, change their ways, and we should be able to get along. But no, there's something deep there. And they'll give you all kinds of religious excuses and political excuses, but address all the political and all the religious issues. And still, there'll be something there. Indicative of the illness, which must and will be healed. The fever comes to burn out the illness. That is what we must focus on. So the Gemara says, what is it says that those who travel back and forth have no peace because of the enemy? And Rav says that even Torah scholars, who by their power of Torah are supposed to be promised peace, he says there's abundant peace for those who love your Torah, they will have no peace from the enemy. This should serve as a lesson to all the religious in the Holy Land who believe the illusion and the fantasy that their religious and ethnic pursuits will somehow keep them safe and secure from harm. Needless to say, that did not work in the Holocaust. It does not work today in the Holy Land, in which religious people are victims of terrorism alongside of non-religious people. Terrorism is an equal opportunity destroyer. Makes no difference between secular and religious, Sephardic and Ashkenazi, or anything of the kind. But a very interesting point made centuries later in a book called Hesed L'Avraham by Rabbi Abraham Azulai about the end of days and the troubles therein. Again, a cleansing process. Rabbi Kook speaks about this cleansing process too. But the Hesed L'Avraham states that during this terrible period, when everybody is going to be subject to all these hardships, those who are called Kabbalists, those who are the spiritually bonded, psychically in tuned people, will be able to pass through this time recognizing that it's the fever that's healing the body. They will be able to lose all of their attachments to this world, their big homes, their big cars, their big bank accounts, their fancy clothing, their fancy titles, and be thrown back to the natural world. If you remember, I discussed this in a previous lesson, using the archetype of the tarot card, major arcana called the Tower, where literally lightning from God comes and strikes you out of your unnatural environment and restores you to nature. This is what the Talmud is telling us, that we're going to have to experience this period of transformation. It is to come upon us. Here are the things that you should look for that are the end products of the illness as the body is producing healing. Watch for them. I look out and I see them today. And I still can't give you any kind of a schedule, because such a schedule cannot exist, because it's not predicated on time. It's predicated on the nature of the illness. Illnesses don't get healed on the clock. They get healed or not, depending on the progression of healing in the body. That is affected by, in physical illness, human behavior, and in the collective body of healing the earth, human spiritual behavior. The more we rise up to the occasion, the more we bring the healing, the more we lower down, the further away the healing. That is what the Gemara is telling us, that we discussed in our last lesson between Rabbi Eliezer, I believe, and Rabbi Yehoshua, that Mashiach is going to come or not, whether or not we do repent. Now, whether we repent or not, Mashiach will come. But the nature of how and when, that all depends if we help it along or not. I've given this analogy before. For those of you who are familiar with the diagram of what we call the divine manifestations of God's light in the universe, the 10 Sephirot, we stand here at the bottom, at the level called Malchut, the physical world. And we have to rise up to the top called the Keter, the crown, where we bond with God. There is a right column, which is the side of blessing, and the left column, call it, if you will, the side of curse, even though it's not really. If you will, the right column, call it the easy way. The left column, the hard way. One way or another, we're going up to the top. And God's going to pull us along at His pace. Which path we choose, well, that's pretty much our choice. Or in other words, the coming of the Messiah comes either in peace or not, depending on what we do about it. And that's what we've got to focus on. I am going to skip ahead now. There are numerous other teachings here about poverty and arrogance, and that they all have to appear and everything else. But I'm going to skip all of that because we've discussed similar things to that. Because I want to stay focused on what we can do individually to contribute to the healing of the collective body. So, I'm going to pick up here again. I'm skipping just a couple of paragraphs. It says the son of David will not come until food will be scarce. And Rabbi Haman ben Hanina says Mashiach will not come until Roman domination has ceased. Zeri says in the name of Rabbi Hanina, Mashiach will not come until there are no more arrogant people in Israel. Well, that's the case. We've got a long time to wait. Rabbi Simlai says in the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Shimon, Mashiach will not come until all the corrupt judges and officers are gone from Israel. Don't hold your breath for that one either. Rabbi Papa says, when there are no more arrogant people, etc., so on. Rabbi Yochanan says, if you see a generation that slides into poverty, expect Mashiach. And that, needless to say, could happen, and does all the time. But this is what I want to pick up. This is, I should say, where I want to pick up, because this is actually a very famous teaching. Rabbi Yochanan further said, Mashiach will come only in a generation that is either entirely righteous or entirely wicked. He will come in a generation that's entirely righteous, as it says, and your people are all righteous, they will inherit the land forever, quoting Isaiah 60, verse 21. He will come to a generation that's entirely wicked, as it says. He saw that there was no worthy man, and was astounded that no one intervened, Isaiah 59:16. So it also says, for my sake, I will do it. Now again, this is where we need to understand. What is this entire generation good or bad stuff? Is any generation really entirely good or entirely bad? Isn't there always a remnant of good, even in the worst of times? I mean, good gosh, we had Lot that was saved from Sodom and Gomorrah. So what does it mean that we have to be entirely righteous? He quotes here an interesting verse that your people are righteous forever, they will inherit the land. It's actually a very interesting verse, because it's one of the two sections in Scripture which, when Christian missionaries approach a Jew and ask, are you saved? Which is a strange concept not found fundamentally in Judaism. You can respond to them, God's gift to the Jewish people is their salvation. And this verse is one of those that you quote to show that your people are righteous, because God says so, and they will inherit the land forever. You can also quote to them Ezekiel 37, the famous prophecy of the valley of dry bones, wherein which the dead dry bones are put together and God brings back to them a spirit of life. And the prophet states that this is the entire house of all Israel. God resurrects them because it's part of God's plan for the Jewish people. Needless to say, Christian missionaries aren't happy with that or anything else because they have an agenda. But if you need a snappy answer for a snotty question, I guess this one will do. But it's true. The shoe does fit. But now, aside from these quotes here, let's understand the psychology of the issue. Because in all due respect, there can never be a generation where everybody is wicked or everybody is righteous. And notice he's speaking about, let's read it again, generation entirely wicked or entirely righteous. Needless to say, this is speaking of the entire house of Israel. We have a problem today. No one knows who the entire house of Israel is. We Israelites today are called Jews because we are descendants from the tribe of Judah, which was the tribe that was exiled in the Babylonian exile, came back to build the Second Temple period, and then was exiled by Rome. And since then we've been called Jews. Tell me, where is the tribes of Naphtali, Zebulun, Gad, Asher, Ephraim, Menashe? We go down the list. No one knows. Everybody postulates, everybody speculates, oh, Ephraim are this and Menashe is that. We have found DNA evidence to show that some amongst the most Negro of Africans in South Africa have the bloodline gene to prove that they're descendants of Aharon Cohen. Just when we thought Jews were these pasty, white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Eastern Europeans. Love to see if they got the gene. My point is, who today is a bloodline descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? That we can define the nation. The answer is we don't know. But I'll give you one guess. It's certainly not all those pasty, white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Eastern European guys. Some will say, well, they're not really Jews, they're descendants of Khazars. That's one of the anti-Semitic accusations against Ashkenazi Jews today. I'm not so sure that that's true, and I'm not so sure that it's completely false either. It's irrelevant. Because if you'll notice here, even though I interjected the term Israel, doesn't necessarily say that, now does it? What is a generation which is completely righteous? I've never known one since the beginning of time. What is a generation which is completely wicked? Sorry, I've never known one since the beginning of time. There's always a mix. But if you look to the growing trends in modern society, we see things today that never existed before in history. And I'm talking about immoral things. Throughout history, you have always had practices such as homosexuality. It was commonly practiced amongst the Greeks and other cultures around the world. But here in the Western world today, if I am not mistaken, I don't believe I am, we have for the first time in history the actual pursuit of the vindication of marriage of same-sex partners. That which is never, I think, pursued before. I don't think two men could have gotten married back in ancient Greece or ancient Rome or anywhere else for that matter. But today, things have changed. Now, there have always been individuals throughout history who did not believe in God. Atheism. Today, atheism has become as if a religion of its own and vehemently pursues a religious agenda with such vehemence that we can compare it to the jihadis who are also out to pursue their agenda. While atheists aren't blowing up and bombing people, they are clearly and definitively doing everything they can to destroy belief in God anywhere and everywhere they could find it. In ancient times, it was my God versus your God. It was Israel versus Rome, or for that matter, Rome versus pagans, or this one or that one, or Christendom versus Islam. It was always God-centered. Today is godless-centered against the world. And we ask, is this a generation which can be called entirely wicked? Now, there are those of us who try our best to be the best human beings that we can be. And I have to confess to you, I myself, your dear Rebbe, I confess my mortality. I confess my humanity. I know I might be letting you down, but I have to confess, I too am a frail and flaw-filled human being. Yes, I have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Sorry, it's part of my humanity. I'm not perfect. Thank God. What kind of relationship could we have if one of us was perfect and the other one wasn't? It would be imbalanced. We'd have nothing in common. We would have no ability to interact. But what the Gemara is really getting at here is the majority of things. Because there is no such thing as absolutes. Even if you look back into the days of the Holocaust, with the movie made famous by Steven Spielberg about the character of Oskar Schindler. He was a card-carrying German Nazi who helped his fellow human beings. Not because they were Jews, because of the love of Israel, but because they were his fellow human beings. You see, very interesting point about the Holocaust that I appreciate that the American Holocaust Museum does, that the Israeli Yad Vashem Holocaust Museum mostly doesn't. You see, the Holocaust did target Jews, that is true. But it did not target just Jews. It targeted many other groups as well. People will respond, yeah, but it was mostly Jews. Okay, I agree. But the Holocaust would have occurred even if there were no Jews. Even if all the Jews had, before the Holocaust began, hopped on a big flying saucer and left the planet, Hitler still would have had his camps, everybody else. The American Holocaust Museum notes that the Holocaust wasn't just a Jewish problem, a crime against Jews. It was a human problem, crimes against humanity. It was an expression of human depravity against fellow human beings. Because millions more died in the camps than Jews. And that's something we must always remember. It is clearly a sign of the worst of times. And yet, there were good people who in their humanity helped others. Now, I'm going to digress for just 1 minute. Think about this, my dear fellow human beings. Here we are living in the Western world today. We are, for technical purposes, at war with a good portion of the Muslim world who just wants to see the death and destruction of Satan in America. Let's say, God forbid, there was a nuclear terrorist attack. The United States of America responds martial law, and like World War II under the Democratic President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, makes an order to gather up all Muslims in the country and put them together like they did with the Japs and try to protect everybody. And many of the Muslim families go on the run because they are put in camps and, God forbid, treated like Jews were treated by the Nazis. I ask you, if you found a scared and starving Muslim family, would you take them in? Would you protect them? Would you break the law and hide enemies of the state, endangering your own lives with people who you would honestly be afraid that could stab you in the back? Now, there's a nice, interesting moral question for you, isn't it? And ask, are we in a generation totally righteous, totally wicked? I wonder. Let's continue. Rabbi Alexander said, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi pointed out a contradiction. He says here, in regards to the redemption, it says, I am God, and its proper time I will hasten the coming of Mashiach. Isaiah 60, verse 22. On one hand it says, it will come in its proper time. On the other hand it says, I will hasten it. This is the famous ahisheyna, be'ita ahisheyna. Alright? Meaning that it's going to come at the natural progression of the healing of the body, or it can be sped up. That there are two potentials in which this can happen. And the Gemara says, if the Jews deserve it, it will be hastened. If they don't, then it won't. It'll come in its proper time. And then Rabbi Alexander said that Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi pointed out another contradiction. He says, and behold, with the clouds of heaven One like a man came, Mashiach. Oh, the book of Enoch really embellishes on that one. This is where we get that whole concept of the supernatural Messiah. Okay? But then they point out another verse. Your king will come to you, a humble man riding on a donkey. Implying that the Mashiach will come humbly. Or here also it says here at a slow pace. So, again, he reconciles this. If the Jews deserve it, Mashiach will come in the clouds of heaven. If not, it will come as a humble man riding on a donkey. Some interpret riding on a donkey to be Mashiach ben Yosef, and riding on the clouds of heaven, Mashiach ben David. It's not what the Gemara says. The Gemara is using this to express to us a quantum scenario. Remember what quantum is? That the only reality is crystallized once it's observed. But prior to its observation, it exists in a moving state and can be simultaneous, parallel, or not yet decided. So our behavior influences how and what and when Mashiach comes. Now that is the important point that I want to get at. I'm not going to digress to get into the issue of what it means that Mashiach comes on a donkey. All right? There's a very famous story in the Christian tradition that Yeshua went and told one of his disciples when he was riding into Jerusalem, go get him a donkey. Why? Because he wanted to make it look like he was doing and fulfilling these words. And boy, oh boy, was that not understood. In other words, the significance of that was understood by the people of his day. Remember, in history, Yeshua never had to deal with Christianity. So it was ahead of his time. But we know that's what happened there, so I'm not going to get into that. But the interesting point, again, I'm trying to make is supernatural, natural. Easy, hard. Quick, slow. Even though we have all these signs now, there is no guarantee that we are any closer in time, that we are going to have a supernatural intervention, or anything of that nature. Psychologically speaking, we're at that point where the body is healing. But we're not talking about the body of a human being, which heals over a period of however many hours or days. We're talking about the body of the earth. And that period could take who knows how long. So what can we do about it? Skip just a wee bit here. Page 665, a very famous story. One that, in my opinion, sums up everything that I'm trying to teach to you here. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi met the prophet Elijah standing at the entrance to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's tomb, which is in Meron. Now, we are about to read a story. Is this story a historical occurrence or just one of those embellished teachings? Personally, I think it's one of these embellished teachings. I don't think this is a historical rendition, judging from the nature of how the story is told, as we will read it. But make your own decisions however you want. It doesn't matter. The point is the moral and lesson of the story. That is what is so true. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi asks Elijah the prophet, hey, will I enter the world to come? And Elijah says, if Hashem, the Shekhinah, desires it. Yeah, I guess so. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says, hey, I saw two people, but I heard the voice of a third. Elijah himself, and then the voice of the Shekhinah. Now Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi asks Elijah, hey, when is Mashiach coming? So Elijah replied, I can answer that. Go and ask Mashiach himself. And where is he sitting? Oh, he's at the gate of the city of Rome. Well, now remember, he's at the graveside of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. That's how I recognize this is more like a moral tale than a historical fact. Because I don't think Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi is picking up and going from the land of Israel to Italy, back and forth. So understand it within this context. So Elijah, he does come and talk to people, as you know. Mashiach, he's at the gates of the city of Rome. So Rabbi Yehoshua says, so how would I recognize him? And he says, he's sitting amongst the poor people suffering from leprosy. Mashiach suffering, Isaiah chapter 53, right? He suffers along with the sins of the Jewish people. Another interesting point, if you ever have to deal with missionaries, when they say to you, well, Isaiah 53 speaks of the Messiah. Some Jewish counter-missionaries want to say, no, it speaks of all the Jewish people, which, if you read clearly the book of Isaiah, it does. But Isaiah 53 in the Zohar is referred to the Messiah. So which is it? Does the suffering servant chapter speak of the nation, or does it speak of the Messiah? The answer should be common sense, that it speaks about both. And why? Because the Messiah is a citizen of the nation and suffers the nation's fate alongside the nation. So it's one and the same. So here he is sitting and suffering. And then the story continues and says, all of them are untying and tying their bandages. So when the Mashiach unties his bandages one by one, why? Instead of not all together? Because he says, I might be needed at any moment. And I don't want to delay my coming by having to rebandage more than one sore. Now Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi goes to Mashiach. And he goes, Shalom Aleichem, Mori v'Rabbi, my master and teacher. So Mashiach replies to him, Shalom Aleichem ben Levi. So Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says to Mashiach, no, when are you coming? Finally, we've been waiting for you for a long time. So what does Mashiach say? Next Thursday at 3 o'clock? No. He says to him, Hayom, I'm coming today. Whoa! No. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi went back to Eliyahu. Long trip from Italy to Rome. Right? And Elijah goes and asks him, so what did Mashiach say? And Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says, he said, peace upon you, ben Levi. So Elijah says to Rabbi Yehoshua, says, he assured you that you and your father are both going to have a portion in the world to come. Okay? So now, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi then says to Elijah, but then he lied to me. He says, I'm coming today. I can hear in the background here as if Eliyahu is chuckling. He quotes to Rabbi Yehoshua Psalm 95 verse 7. This is what he had in mind. I will come today if only you will obey his voice. Hayom im bekol'o tishma'u. This is the famous teaching of how Mashiach is supposed to come. A point which was taught by Rabbi Yisrael ben Eliezer, the famous Baal Shem Tov, founder of Hasidim, who stated that each of us have a spark of the Messiah within us, and it is incumbent upon us to activate the Messiah within us individually before it could ever be activated politically within the context of the nation. Redemption comes first to the individual before it can come to the nation. So therefore, we conclude where we began. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua, same, right, was questioning. Israel will only merit the Messiah when they repent. And that's exactly what we're saying here. Today, if only you hear his voice. We spoke about the absolute natural progression of life on earth, healing the planet, healing the human race. It is inevitable. It says it again, Be'ita, it will come in its time. But ahisheyna, we can speed it up. If, like Eliyahu, like Mashiach says, Hayom im b'kol o tishma'u. If today you can hear my voice. Another interesting teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, very famous issue. At one Rosh Hashanah, he made his Merkabah Aliyah ascent into heaven, in which he had an experience, a vision of Mashiach. And again he asked Mashiach, when are you coming? Mashiach spoke to the Baal Shem Tov in a vision and said, when people are able to make spiritual ascents like you are doing now. He says that's a good time to look for. And that's one of the major motivations which has led me to found our yeshiva and teach what we're teaching. Why specifically I insist upon teaching practical applications of meditation, the practical bonding exercises, the prophetic techniques. Because I believe the Baal Shem Tov. And I believe that we, each of us, male and female, whoever we are, wherever we are, can have the experience of the ascent if today we only hear His voice. We might not be able to individually make much of a dent to speed along the coming and the process of the redemption. But every little bit counts. Like we learned in the beginning about biocentrism, that the entire universe, everything is alive. So you and I, maybe we're just individual cells in a body of billions and trillions of cells. But we can become part of the solution, part of the healing, as opposed to part of the problem, part of the illness. That's all our choices. And I think God is watching. That's it. That concludes for tonight. I want to thank you all for joining me. And as Rat Hashem, God be willing, we'll be back next week and we'll pick up where we left off. Thank you all for joining me. I'll see you all online. God bless. Good night. Shalom. 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 God bless. Good night. Shalom.